Good morning, everybody. This is Tam from One Body Exercise Physiology and Pilates. I am one of the exercise physiologists here, and I am looking forward to presenting to you guys a little bit of information around osteoporosis and how we can preserve our bone health throughout life. It's a topic we covered on site in a event we hosted last week, we just wanted to put it together for our friends online, and so it can be a little bit more accessible to the community. The topics will be around normal bone structure. We're going to be diving deeper into osteoporosis, osteopenia, what they are, and the causes and effects of those on us. We'll also be talking about prevention and management of osteoporosis and really driving home with some changes you can make today that are going to help you to build a better tomorrow, because it's not too late to start working on your health, right? So a bit about bones. They're actually a living structure. They're made of living tissue that constantly remodels, a bit like our whole body. Our body is so wonderful at adapting to the stimulus that we put it through. So as we stress our body, it learns to adapt to those stresses. The bones are quite similar in that sense. There's two parts of the bone. There's the compact bone, which is the outer part that's really, really dense and hard. And then the spongy bone is the inner portion of the bones that you can see on this slide. And it's a little bit softer. It's got sort of little holes throughout it. And that can either be more dense or less dense. There's a couple of different types of cells that live in our bones as well. There's the osteoblasts. They're our friends. They're our bone builders. They are working hard to build our bone using collagen, calcium, and minerals that are laid in the bone. And the osteoblasts use that to harden and make those bones more rigid, more dense. The osteoclasts, however, they're the destroyers. They break it down. So when we're going through a process of those bones becoming more brittle, what that is the osteoclast breaking it down by dissolving the mineral mix and collagen that's in the bones, and then they use that in other places in the body. It gets released into the bloodstream for other uses. So if our body feels as though that mineral mix and collagen is better used somewhere else because our bones aren't needing it, that's where that can start to happen. There's other reasons that it can come down. We'll get into that a bit further. So if you think about your bones, they're a bit like a bank account. So we need to be depositing that bone, building that bone up, because when we stop depositing, then the bone loss happens faster, okay? So a few ways that we can deposit into our bones, right? Ways we build that up as adults and children is through nutrition. Your calcium, you can get from dairy, leafy greens, tofu, chia seeds, fortified orange juices, getting lots of calcium in those in our body. Vitamin D also is really helpful in building those bones up, and that's because they're actually really crucial. The vitamin D is crucial in calcium absorption. So ways you can get that vitamin D is through sunlight, fatty fish, egg yolk, supplementation. Sometimes consult with your doctor if you're concerned about that. And then, finally, exercise. So exercise is really important in building that density, depositing that bone structure to make it nice and strong. And we'll go into that a little bit more as to how and why that helps. The reason that bones can become weak after the age of 30, it will naturally happen to everybody. You really want to lay down as much bone structure as you can throughout your whole entire life, but prior to that age of 30 is really great for reducing your risk of osteoporosis and osteopenia, because after 30, naturally those dang osteoclasts, the destroyers, are going to start being a little bit more active and breaking down that bone. So when we're younger, firstly, that's a really important time. That's why it's so crucial for young kids to be jumping, moving, eating right, building those bones, building their strength. That's like prime time to be building them up to peak strength, peak density. Okay. Some other reasons is just natural hormonal changes. There's not a lot we can do about that, right? your bones will become weaker much more rapidly through menopause, prior, during and after menopause, unfortunately for the ladies. Low calcium and low vitamin D are also reasons why the bones may become more weak. Some medical conditions and medicines can have an effect on the density of your bones, and not enough weight-bearing exercise. So if you're not loading those bones, loading your body, naturally it is going to sort of become of the mind that, hey, we don't need to be that strong. We're only supporting so much, so often. Like, they're gonna use those minerals elsewhere in the body. So that's why it's really important to get that movement, that exercise in, so that they respond in a way that makes your body stronger, healthier, more able. So back to osteoporosis. What is osteoporosis? It is a condition that means that basically your bones have become a lot weaker, and the risk of your fractures and breaks does increase quite significantly. So your bones are like that honeycomb on the inside. That spongy bone can be more dense or have more holes. So as you can see in the image here, the osteoporotic bone has got much larger gaps in that honeycomb structure, whereas the healthier bone, they're a lot closer together, makes them a lot more strong. Osteoporosis is very common, especially after the age of 50. Now, I haven't got a slide specifically on it, but also we talk about osteopenia. Now, what that actually is kind of the stepping stone towards osteoporosis. So it's where you've not got sort of healthy levels of bone structure, but you're not quite in that osteoporosis diagnosis area. So it's where you're starting to become osteoporotic. Your bones are getting more brittle, more weak, and it's just that red flag area where you really need to start thinking about your life choices and lifestyle management of the condition. So how do we diagnose osteoporosis and osteopenia? It's done through a quick and painless test. It's called a DEXA, dual energy X-ray absorptiometry, say that fast, scan. A DEXA scan, it uses X-ray beams to measure how much calcium and minerals are in your bones. And now the result of that scan is that a score called a T-score is given, which tells you the density of your bones. Usually they will assess the bones where we tend to get really frequent fractures in clients that have osteoporosis. So the hip, the spine, and the head of the femur are really big sites of injury when osteoporosis does come into effect. So the T-score, as you can see in the image below, the numbers, it's not something that you need to get too wound up on. But if your bone density is above -1, that's a normal bone density. If it's between -1 and -2.5, then you would be diagnosed with osteopenia. And -2.5 to -4 is that osteoporosis territory. So if you've ever had a scan and you want to check out your T-score and see where you lie on that, go ahead and have a look. But really the numbers we don't need to dive too deep into. What's important is just understanding the condition and how we can manage that. All right, so why does exercise help osteoporosis, osteopenia? Why does it help our bones? So like I was saying before, you've got to stress your body in order for it to adapt. You have to stress to progress. So exercise is a stress that we put our body through. So it's going to signal for those bone building cells to get to work, to start working harder, because our body is under stress. It needs to be stronger. It needs to be more capable because of these things we're putting it through. It's wanting to adapt. That's why we see those changes with exercise. By exercising, you can slow the bone loss up to 1 to 2% each year. It's also going to improve your balance and reduce your falls risk, which is really crucial when we have weak bones, because that's where we get a lot of our fractures and injuries and breaks, is through falls. So falls prevention is massive. Exercise also helps build your strength and mobility in the joints. It's just going to reduce your risk of fractures, and it's also going to boost your mood and energy, which is just a beautiful positive that comes from including exercise into your life. So with these conditions, osteoporosis and osteopenia, we do have specific types of exercise that we do try to target. One is strength training, so trying to move weight, right? That weight can be body weight. It can start really light, really simple. You can use resistance bands, you can do Pilates, you can use actual, weights, kettlebells, milk cartons, milk bottles. Get creative. So strength training is essentially about trying to increase how strong your muscles are by lifting, pushing, moving heavier, gradually, right? We want to start at the level that we're at, start with a strength exercise that, is suitable to our current ability. And then the goal with strength training is to increase that challenge, make it more heavy and more difficult with time. Strength training is really, really important with osteoporosis and osteopenia because it is quite a safe way to start making those changes. The second exercise we're looking at is impact exercises and weight bearing. So you're walking, stomping your feet, marching, running, doing, abrupt kind of jumps or heel drops, things like that. Anything that's going to kind of create that short, sharp force into the body. That is our impact training. And for people who are just starting out, something as simple as walking is a really great place to start. We would caution the osteoporosis, so the really much more brittle bones. We're a lot more cautious with the impact training, starting them there, making sure we start really, really simple, really light, really careful, because that sudden impact can be a little bit damaging to the body if those bones aren't ready for it. But yeah, and even with osteopenia, we need to be cautious there, but it tends to be that we can dive in a bit quicker and build that impact quite a bit in the normal bones and the osteopenia sort of criteria. But yeah, with everything, always we want to start smaller and build up as our body adapts and as we get more tolerant of it. The third type of exercise we really focus on is balance and mobility training. So things like your Pilates, your strength training to make your muscles more able to balance you and catch you. You can use things like your single leg stand and just any gentle joint friendly mobility style exercises, circles, things like that. All of these things are trainable. It's really important to know that, if your balance isn't good at the moment, we can make that better with practice. Okay. If you don't feel like you're all that strong, it's something that we can make improvements on. Everything here is trainable. So yeah, you just got to start where you're at and build that up. So from today, what can you do? So starting today, what can you do to really support your bone health into the future? Well, firstly, you can limit your time spent sitting. Spend more time up and moving. The body wasn't made to be stagnant and still. So whenever you catch yourself out and there's an opportunity for you to get up and move, take those opportunities where you can. You can add gentle impact into your day-to-day with just walking, maybe a little bit of a stomp into the ground, adding a little bit of force. If you've built up or you're quite healthy and strong as it is, you might like to jump and just add that force where possible, where you can. You can practice your balance, standing with your heel to your toe, or like a single leg stand. You can do that while you're brushing your teeth or while you're waiting for the kettle to boil, taking opportunities just to challenge your balance at a point that is not risky. You want to preserve, you want to really foster that safety. Make sure you've got, a countertop or something there, and find a level, whether it's heel to toe or feet together. Find somewhere that makes your ankles and knees just kind of jitter a little bit. So we want those little corrections, but it's not ideal to be choosing a balanced position that means you're falling immediately, right? Like we don't want to be swaying and catching ourselves every second. Find a layer that's a bit safer, that there is those corrections happening, but that you can hold that quite comfortably and confidently for 30 seconds to a minute, or, you know, while you brush your teeth or while that kettle boils. Finally, we can work on loading our muscles, building them up big and strong. So a few quick exercises that are easy to take home for you to start today is our sit to stand. So simple as that. You're sitting down on the chair, cross those arms across your chest if you can, and stand on up. Then sit back down, stand up, sit down. Do that, 8, 10, 12 times in a row, whatever feels good for you, whatever starts to build that sort of heat in those legs. You're wanting to try and get that stress to progress there. If the sit to stand is way too easy and you'd like to take it up a notch, and when I say way too easy, I mean like if you're doing 12, 15 and you're not even feeling a single thing, then you want to try maybe the next level up. And that would be having one foot in front of the other as you sit down and stand up. That's going to put a bit more load into one leg in particular. It's also going to challenge your balance a little bit when you stand up. And finally, if that's also not really your jam and you want to try something even more progressive to that, as you go to sit on that chair, imagine you are sitting down into it, but try to hover your weight just lightly, a little bum tap on the chair maybe before you stand back up. Okay, so we still want to kind of hinge at the hips and tip that chest a little bit as we go to sit. And then before all of our tension is released by sitting fully, we want to hold that tension and stand straight back up, right? Lower down towards the chair, knowing that it's there if you fall, but trying to avoid falling into that. See how that feels for you. So that's one option there. Take that one home with you. All of these you want to sort of aim towards between that kind of 8 and 15 repetitions. If you start at 8, you want to work up to about 10, 15 of those, and then build from 1 round to 2 rounds, and then 2 rounds to 3 rounds, just working through those progressions so that your body feels challenged. Another one here is our push-up. So you can do those on a wall. You can step those feet, a little bit up from that wall. Hands come to the wall just like in the pictures here. And you're just bending those elbows to lower that chest down towards the wall. Press away to straight arms again. So lowering the chest and pressing away is our wall push-up there. If that feels challenging enough for you, stay here. Another option to make it a little bit more challenging is to take that weight, as in taking that body weight and taking those hands lower. So finding a bench or a really stable bar or table. You can lean down and then you have to bend into that chest. It's a bit lower to the ground, so your body weight is going to feel a lot heavier. Finally, the other options are to go down to the ground on your knees. You can do them on your knees, or you can do them on your toes if you're expert level, if you're really strong. So adding those push-ups again, between 8 and 15, build up 1 to 3 rounds of those. We want to really aim to do at least 2 rounds of what your body can tolerate. 2 to 3. Even if your number's only 8, try and get a second round in to progress that. Alrighty, step ups. Now it is kind of hard sometimes to find a step, but get creative. Have a look around your house. Is there a curb, a lip to get into the house? Have you got steps down to your shed? Is there a curb that is on a footpath? Or maybe you actually have a step or a step ladder or something stable that you can use. So we want to step up with one leg and back down, and we want to lead with the same leg time and time again as we build that tension and increase those repetitions. So stepping up. Same leg each time for 10 or 12, whatever suits you there. And then we change legs, go to the other side, and then back for round 2 once you've finished both sides. Alrighty, carrying heavy is another really, really important aspect of our bone health, osteoporosis management, because the heavier of a weight of a force that is going into our body and pressing into our hips, pressing into our spine, pressing into our legs, the more that those bones should respond positively to that. So starting with what we call it a farmer's carry in the picture. So you're going to grab something in each hand. It might be cans, it might be a bottle of milk, maybe you have kettlebells that you can grab, maybe you want to grab some grocery bags and just chuck some stuff inside those. You want to load it up and you want to hold that and walk, okay, up and down. Make it as heavy as you can tolerate, nice strong back, remembering when we lift them up that we do want to have a good sort of lifting technique. We want to press through our legs, bend our knees to pick the weights up and press through our legs to stand up straight, keeping our spine nice and neutral throughout. Another thing with the farmer's carries here, if you're a little bit concerned about your balance, you could always consider something like a backpack or, you know, something you can just strap onto your body and load that up and just try and get that weight through your body there and get some movement in with that weight, and then every step is going to be more impactful. And just a little note on that, if you're holding things in each hand, remember that life isn't completely symmetrical. You don't need to have the same weight in both hands. It doesn't need to be perfectly balanced, okay? In fact, we encourage people to use uneven weights in each side, just so that that body can adapt a bit more to real life circumstances. So yeah, if you've got 3-litre bottle of milk in one hand and a bag of rice in the other and they're not the same, not an issue. Maybe just think about changing hands over and going for your second round with them in the other hand. All right, so there's some things you can take home today. I'm going to go through a little bit about the actual Australian physical activity guidelines. And what they say is that adults should be active on most days of the week, preferably every day. So get up, get moving, guys. We want to try and get some moderate to vigorous intensity exercise for 30 minutes on most days of the week. Okay, so what moderate to vigorous exercise looks like is something that is quite challenging, but not like maximal. Okay, so you want to get that bit more breathless. You want to feel that bit more exerted in your body to that moderate kind of level. So we've got a scale, it's called a Borg scale, a Borg RPE scale. I don't have it in front of me right now, but it goes from 0 to 10, 10 being the most maximal exertion that you have ever, that you can feel like you're completely exhausted at your absolute max, and 0 being no exertion whatsoever. Okay, so we're looking for that kind of mid-range between 3 and 5. So that's like light to moderate vigorous. So vigorous activity is that it almost feels uncomfortable. You can barely speak a sentence. So you can imagine you'd be a little bit puffy, a little bit out of breath, but not completely ruined. So that's 7-8. Even that's quite vigorous. So where more sweet spot would be that it feels like you can exercise for hours. You're breathing heavily, but you can keep a short conversation. That's your moderate. So somewhere between that moderate and vigorous for about 30 minutes on to most days of the week. We want to go for muscle strengthening activities on 2 or more days of the week. Muscle strengthening being like those ones that I've shown you before, your sit to stands, anything that is building in weight, building, progressing in strength. Okay, your body weight is part of that. Okay, 2 or more days of the week. And then functional activities, your mobility, your balance and coordination. We're aiming to do that 3 or more days of the week. Okay, Generally, also we want to aim for several hours of light intensity physical activity daily. So that just comes back to the, limit sitting time kind of thing. So we really, that light activity is going to be a feeling that you can just go for hours, right? It's not something that's very exerting. You want to try and get that in all the time. You can easily carry a conversation. Your body is moving, but it doesn't feel too challenging. Do that as much and as often as you can. The statistics around the guidelines show that 1 in 5 adults met the physical activity guidelines in 2022. So only 1 in 5 were able to achieve those guidelines that I've just discussed. And only 1 in 4 undertook strength or toning exercises on 2 or more days in the last week when the study was conducted. So not a lot of strength training and not a lot of adults meeting those guidelines at the moment. So we really want to work on that, because these are set to sort of as like a benchmark for trying to preserve your health, for limiting your risk of any chronic conditions, and that natural aging, like trying to kind of counter that and keep as healthy and functional and able as possible. Overall, the males were more likely to meet the physical activity guidelines. So that was 24.9% the males were able to meet the guidelines versus only 19.9% of females were able to. Now, I just want to kind of leave you with a bit of a question mark there. Have a think about why that might be. If you're a woman and you're listening or watching this, have some reflection there. Quite often, we are in the throes of parenting and household management and a lot of that. And I'm not saying that the men don't have a burden of that as well, but quite often women really, we get stuck in this really selfless stage in our life, and we can really let ourselves slip. But we need to revert that thinking and remember that we have to prioritize ourselves and to show up for our family and for our work and our community. We need to look after ourselves first. So movement is medicine, and this little quote here I just find hits home really hard, and that's: if you don't make time for your wellness, you'll be forced to make time for your illness. So quite hard hitting there, and it's so true. I know that we can be quite time poor, but finding ways to integrate movement and exercise into our day is so pivotal for us being able to show up and be sane and able and confident and strong. It's very important. Okay, so how can One Body help if you're listening to this and you are going, what can I do? I can't do this at home. I need help. We do have a 6-week osteoporosis program. It includes an initial consultation with our EPs, which includes testing, and you get 2 exercise classes a week included in the osteoporosis program. And then at the end of the 6 weeks, we do another review with the exercise physiologist and retest, check in how everything's going and whether we're making progress on those initial assessment measures. So that's a really great option. We also accept GP care plans, chronic management plans, and we have private exercise physiology appointments as well. If one-on-one isn't for you, or you're pretty confident in yourself and in your where you're at this time, and you want to jump straight into group exercise, we have some very beginner-friendly osteoporosis and strength training classes. We run them Monday at 11, Thursday at 1, and at the moment we're looking at adding in another session. So if you're listening and there's a particular day or time that suits you, give us a holler, let us know. So that's a really safe, supportive environment, only up to 5 people in a class. So it's really personal, and we do care and support you tremendously for those osteoporosis strength classes. We also run clinical group classes, which you can have access to our upstairs clinical gym, our reformers, and we, as an EP, come up with a program for you. And with the clinical classes, you'll come in and be supported by our exercise physiologists to run through your program. Okay, so as you're wrapping your head around that program, we give you a lot more close attention, and then as you get more independent, we kind of branch out and share the love between everyone at the clinical classes. But we certainly support you through that, coming up with a program that's really suited to you and your goals and your needs. Finally, we have a weight circuit Thursday 4:30 and Friday at 5:30 a.m. and 6:15 a.m. Those are a little bit more intense, but they are fantastic if you're pretty healthy, pretty strong, pretty able, and don't have too many injuries or limitations. They're a really great option for you. And likewise, we are looking at adding an extra session in, so stay tuned. And that concludes our little voiceover session for our osteoporosis talk. I really hope you got some valuable information out of this. If you've got any questions, please feel free to give One Body a call, send us an email, flick us a message on Facebook. We are super, super stoked that you've stayed tuned this whole time. Thank you for supporting us. Thank you for being part of our beautiful team. And yeah, I hope that you enjoyed the talk. Bye.